Hello. It literally took every ounce of determination and what do you call it? Self-motivation. I don't even know what I'm saying. To come film this video because I filmed it a couple of days ago and the lighting was really bad because I tried it in my office where I work and I have like nice neon, like really good mood lighting, but it didn't work. It just, everything looked really odd. So I've come back to my original filming place. And also today's Friday. I had a really long week. Today was also really long at work. So everything was just working against me. But you know what? I'm so like determined to film and upload at least once a week. So I'm gonna do it. I have my dehumidifier running, so if you hear like a low hum, maybe I should turn it off. Give me a second. Okay, much better. Today I'm talking about Novelist as a Vocation by Haruki Murakami, and the reason I wanted to refilm it is because I feel like some of my most like best performing videos are my Murakami ones, so I don't want to be like super low energy, so scrap that. We're talking about this book again. I just want to say that the title here is a little bit misleading because it kind of reads as a non-fiction, but if I were to categorize this book, I would put it more as a memoir because I feel like this is the closest thing that all Murakami fans would receive to a memoir. I don't see him as someone who's gonna go ahead and write something more personal than this because he has been pretty private. He has been like pretty much not doing any interviews and stuff, especially in Japan, so this was pretty close to that. I did really enjoy it, which is very apparent by my use of annotations. The amount of writing and annotating I did in this book is a pretty good sign of how much I enjoyed it, which I didn't actually think I would, because if I think about the other non-fiction book I read, what I talk about when I talk about running, which by the way there's a chapter in this which is kind of like that. I didn't enjoy it as much, perhaps because I'm not really a runner, but even the philosophical parts in that book I was not like a huge fan of, so I was a little bit skeptical, but I actually really enjoyed it. This book has about, I think, 10-11 essays, so they are, okay, I'm just gonna show you what they're about. One of the chapters here, When I Became a Novelist, is actually the introduction to Hear the Wind Sing / Pinball 1973. I really loved the chapter, but I feel like it was just more raw and well written in this version. The book itself is more like Murakami addressing a range of topics that might be in the minds of people who are thinking about becoming an author. I forgot to have my wine here. Drinking some Pinot Noir. It is Friday. He addresses these topics more to talk about his own experiences as a writer, and I think if you're someone who's already a Murakami fan or familiar with his work, you will enjoy this more. As someone coming into the world like you're just born, as someone coming in who's not a Murakami reader, I think this might not be as enjoyable, simply because like the title almost makes you think of this book as a 5 steps to becoming a novelist, or like 5 things you should consider when you become a novelist, that type of a book, but it's really not. It's quite contemplative and it's quite, I would say, it references a lot of his previous works as well. I'll go chapter by chapter just so I can give you a good indication of like how he has structured the book. So he starts with a foreword talking about how this book was published in 2015 in Japan, and until then the first 6 essays were published in a magazine called Monkey Business, and they were all written through the time he's written books. So throughout his lifetime he took some time to really put aside and write just about random things, and then he kind of retouched them every now and then to reflect his more like current opinion on things. And then he finally fine-tuned them, and then he published them as part of this magazine. And more recently, in 2015, this, along with a couple more essays, were put together and published as this book. It's only now in 2023 that the English translation has come out, so it's not very recent in terms of like when he's written it. Murakami himself started writing sometime in 1979, I believe. So he's been writing for a really, really long time, most of his life. And this book addresses, like the name suggests, if you want to be someone who writes for the rest of their life and like you want to make a living out of writing, he talks about that, not like the glamorized version of being an author, which is kind of the reason why I really liked it, because I feel like a lot of the writing here makes you almost not want to be a writer, because he removes some of these misconceptions around being an author or being a creative. I personally think that anyone in the creative world would benefit from reading this, because although it's written like he's talking to a novelist one-on-one, a lot of the themes are actually like pretty, I think, applicable if you are a creative. Then we go on to the second chapter, which talks about our novelist's broad-minded, or is that the first one? Oh, that's the first one, okay. And here I actually enjoyed the part where he talked about writing almost as a very natural way to express yourself, and he kept emphasizing on this like self-expression aspect of it again and again. And I know it seems quite simple, but the whole thought behind it is the more you think that you are an author and you're writing because you're an author, you almost put yourself at this like, you know, thought that you need to write at a certain level or you need to write in a certain style. If you think like I'm a creative and I need to perform, and you know, if it is performative writing, most of the time it doesn't come across as naturally. And as long as you are thinking of it as a way to express yourself, things will come across a lot better. I myself in my lifetime have tried multiple times to like sit down and write, and I have written a lot of stuff in my time, but I feel like I'm not at the point where I can think about publishing anything or putting anything solid together, is because I keep thinking that I need to be more clear, like I need more clarity with certain concepts, certain ideas about the world before I start putting my work out there. But he actually says the opposite, where he says that the point of writing is that you achieve clarity through writing. Most of the time, if you have a question, writing it out and you know the words follow each other, and you maybe sometimes you don't even reach a conclusion, but it helps you kind of almost make sense of certain things in your head through writing. So almost see it as an experiment, see it as a process of you reaching answers that you otherwise won't by just simply thinking about them. And I think that is such a good advice to give a lot of people who think that, you know, they need to have some form of, I guess, intellectual capacity or clarity in their head to start writing about something. He also talks about how you grow as an author over time. So in the beginning, you will have some limitations to your writing no matter what, and that can, like by writing again and again and throughout your life, you will overcome them. But we cannot expect us to like basically put out the best work in the first instance, only because you're only going to do what is the best of your capability at the time. And if you're able to produce something perfect in the first go, then there would really be no, you know, like need to do things again and again and practice and improve. So like everything else in life, writing too improves with practice. And he does say that like writing is one thing that really anyone who's literate can pick up. There are many other things in life that require a lot more preparation to start doing, but becoming a novelist really is about you picking up a pen and start writing and expressing yourself. So that way novelists are quite open in having other people come into the field and start writing. But what really differentiates one novelist from another is their capacity to keep on writing over time and not exhaust themselves. And I think this is also a part where the glamorization element comes in, because if you think about it, a lot of artists that we have known in the past have written for a brief period of time, have done incredible creative works, and then they've burnt out or something has happened and they've really not produced a lot in their lifetime. Whereas there are some other people who have consistently brought out a lot of work in their lifetime and they've become like a lifetime novelist, if you can say that. And the way they've been able to do that is by following a form of a routine, a lot of discipline, a lot of persistence, resilience. And this is what he keeps talking about again and again, that it is not the glitz and the glamour that makes you a novelist, but it's actually those hours of like, you know, sitting there and going deeper and deeper within your mind and actually building the mental stamina to keep working on things over time and keep rereading things that you've written and keep improving them, almost doing 6 and 7 rereads of the same book before you even send it to your editor. So all of these things are really, you know, they require a lot of patience. It's not just word vomit and then you send it to your editors and they create magic. A lot of it is very intricate, very detailed, very patient work. And I think even as someone like me, like I sit down and I write, I do lose that patience sometimes, where I'm like, oh, I wish I could just like sit down and write the whole thing in one go, but it doesn't really work like that. The second chapter, When I Became a Novelist, that's the one that's picked up from the foreword in Hear the Wind Sing. And what I thought was done better is it gives more context to the time and the period where Murakami grew up, and almost like talking about how his generation, born after the wars, really didn't have a lot of like dark material to draw from. And I know that it's like really subjective, because even today we are like post-war generation technically, right? At least I can't say we are, because a lot of the world is still riddled with war, but a lot of us haven't seen firsthand, or we haven't really been a part of war. And that almost puts us in a position where we're not able to draw from experience that poets and writers once drew from, especially a few generations before us. And a lot of the modern classics we read are written by people who lived through that era, and they have a lot of experiences to talk from. And what he says is that, not having had any of those experiences, he really went by whatever was around him, and he almost encouraged people to do the same, instead of wanting to put yourself in a literary bubble where you feel like you need to write in a certain way, or you need to live up to a certain standard, or you need to write about some deep material. He's encouraging people to write more about their own situation that they live in and their own circumstances, because it is a way to really leave behind a piece of your existence and your time. And I do feel like I really cannot find many works out there that talk about the current, like contemporary works representing contemporary times are not really done that well. Whereas I feel like the reason Murakami's works are so nostalgic for people, or they hold so much nostalgia, is because they are like time capsules for the time that he lived in. And whether or not we agree or disagree with him, it is representative of certain aspects of that time. And I wish almost that we were able to capture that as well today in writing. I feel like a lot of music videos do really well, like in capturing our current situation, our current circumstances. But I feel like books, I'm still yet to read one that makes me feel like, wow, like, you know, I'm happy to be living in the current time, and it makes me romanticize my current situation and not what's in the past, because I'm kind of bored of romanticizing the past at this point. My favorite chapter here is about originality, this one. And the reason I liked it so much is because I feel like, at least for me, I would say, semi-okay-ish read. I'm not an incredibly well-read person. I'm starting to pick up more and more books as time has passed, but I did have a long gap. But in my time that I've read, I haven't really picked up a lot of books that talk about concepts so like critically but still make you hopeful. So when he talks about originality, he almost says that originality sucks, really, because if you are to produce something and people really say like, oh my god, that's fantastic, I love it from the get-go, like it's so original, it's so authentic, chances are that what you've produced is more like a retelling or a recreation, or like something that people are already somewhat semi-used to. If you do produce something completely original, most of the time throughout history it's been proven that people don't take to it well, and you will be ostracized and most probably not receive any like applause for it in your lifetime. And only time can really say whether or not something is original once it becomes a source of inspiration for other people to draw from. So before that, producing something original, and honestly our obsession with producing original content, really does put us in that position where we think like it's a good thing, and like the more original, you know, the better. And if it's original, you're gonna receive any form of like, you know, recognition for your work. But that's not entirely true, because in order to do something original, you really have to break so many barriers, and you have to go against the, I guess, agreed common way of thinking and way of doing things. So I think that too was very reflective. Like, I've only scratched the surface of what's in the chapter, but I thought that was really well written too. There are chapters about what content you should write about, what type of characters you should write about, and I thought it was really interesting how he said that whenever he had some negative experiences in his life, he, instead of just like taking it as a negative experience, he started thinking about how those moments led them or introduced him to characters that he could potentially write about. For the longest time, he only wrote about positive characters because writing was his escape from everything kind of dreadful in his life. And when he started talking about, I guess, like when he started introducing these negative characters, it almost made sense to him because he was drawing from his negative experiences and turning them into something creative. And that too was quite interesting. Like, basically his whole idea about how we should be more less judgmental and less conclusive as people. And he does say that if you're someone who jumps to conclusion and who needs a conclusion at every point in time, it's unlikely that you will be a good author, because what makes a good author is the ability to just absorb and not draw conclusions, absorb things and then portray them as they are. And I feel like I'm not that person entirely. And he did say that he didn't used to be like that, and it took a lot of practice to absorb things and see things and just keep them as they are, and then later draw from them as inspiration. So I do think it's important to be mindful of that, but at the same time, he does talk about slowing down and actually observing as much of life as possible, which also I'm not very good at. So pointers for myself. He does talk a lot about education and its role in how it shapes our way of thinking and it shapes our creative process. That particular section comes from the fact that he does tell people that in order to start writing, your first thing you should start doing is reading as many books as possible. And as a student, he just says that a lot of the information and a lot of the world values and everything in his life he's absorbed from books. And naturally, the education system doesn't, like, it teaches you a lot about things, but it doesn't make you passionate about anything. And that's where it's lacking, that people should be leaving schools with a deep passion for something that they want to do for the rest of their lives, and not just a mental clutter filled with things that they will not even use for the majority of their lifetimes. But he also talks about how reading could even function as escapism for many people who find it difficult to relate to their immediate environment. It introduces us to so much more than what we are capable of thinking from just being around the people we are. The last two chapters are more about like audience, who does he write for, and also his the importance of kind of going global for him. I think the last chapter is quite interesting for someone who writes in their native language and is looking to expand and go international. And the chapter where he talks more about who does he write for in terms of an audience understanding could be interesting for anyone who is really lagging behind from thinking like, who is my audience, who should I write for? Because all of these things are almost secondary when it comes to writing to express yourself and actually enjoy the process of writing. But overall, I think for anyone thinking about you know, even having a creative block or just struggling to think of themselves as creative, or someone who's just thinking about writing and trying their hand out in novel writing, I think this would be a good little starter. Or it's just like, I would say it's more philosophical about things that even regularly you think about, and not just in the context of writing or creating something. So yeah, as far as nonfiction goes, I do think this is his best work so far. I am not someone who loves all of his work. There are works that I've loved, there's works that I've been meh about, there's some that I've not even really been able to push past, and I probably read the audiobook. There are some that I'm rereading, so I'm all over the place with Murakami. That's why I feel like I'm able to give a more, I guess, objective view on his work. So really, I do think this is one of his better books, but it is definitely read between the lines than, like, if you take it as face value, it doesn't give you as much depth as many would be expecting. I think I personally gave it like a 3.5 or 4, even though I really liked it, simply because I feel like he could have gone deeper and he could have, like, it's a bit short for me, like it read really quick. I wanted it to be a little bit longer and go into those topics a little bit further maybe. But yeah, that's my review of Haruki Murakami's Novelist as a Vocation, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Cheers! Happy Friday, happy Saturday, whenever you're watching this.